Hi everybody, and welcome back to Lost Genre Mother-in-Law Stories. For today's video, I have 3 different stories, so let's get started with the first one. My dear husband broke his shoulder while inline skating a few years ago. He needed surgery to correct some problems that the break had caused. We had a child who was 18 months old at the time. I asked my in-laws if they would be willing to help out with our child during the first few days that my dear husband was going to be in the hospital. I asked them for help because they are younger than my parents and they live closer to us than my parents, enabling me to spend time with my daughter and have my daughter visit her dad at the hospital for short visits when he was up to it. At first, they said that they would have to think about it. A few days went by and there was no call from them. Usually, they call and have inane conversations with dear husband for up to an hour at a time, several nights a week. Then, they said that they could only do it for one night and that we would have to bring her to their home at a specific time and have her out of their home at a specific time. But that wasn't too helpful to us, as dear husband was to be in the hospital for several days, and honestly, I didn't need to have any extra commitments placed on my schedule. So, I asked my parents to care for my daughter during those critical first days. They both graciously agreed to help, even though they have full lives and problems of their own. Then, my in-laws became very involved in my husband's surgery at the last minute. They started telling us when they would be over and what they would be doing to help, including planning dinners and bringing other relatives over to visit. As far as I was concerned, they had already declined to help with what we really needed help with the most, someone to commit to caring for my child while I was unavailable. And I did not need to worry about the logistics of getting her from my in-laws' home to the next caregiver at such a stressful time. My parents brought my daughter to the hospital to see dear husband one afternoon, and my in-laws were there too. My in-laws started doting on her and wanted to take her out for the rest of the day. They acted like this was all fun and games. It was not convenient for my parents to let her go with my in-laws as they were getting tired and still had to make the trip back to their home. So I said, no. My in-laws started to get upset. They got very cold with me after that and left the hospital. Later, when dear husband was on the road to recovery, they said that they were upset about how they were treated. They said they felt left out and just wanted to help, and that we wouldn't let them spend time with their granddaughter. I feel that they want everything their own way. They couldn't help out with our original request, and that was fine. But they then felt that they could dictate how the rest of the plans would go, as long as it was convenient for them. I feel they were just upset because they couldn't call the shots. They just don't understand that there are times when other people have needs that come first. The last thing we needed was to feel that we didn't have the support of family, and that there was a problem brewing with them that needed to be dealt with. In all honesty, I don't count on them too much for support in general. I only ask for their help as a last resort because it always comes with terms and conditions, and they never end up being a great help. Most of the time, they just make things harder. But there's not much we can do. My husband knows how they are, and he's the one that's usually more reluctant to get his parents involved when we need help with something. His go-to support system are my parents, and they enjoy every minute they can have bonding with our kids. Come on, it's taking care of your grandkid. It's not like they're asking you to pack boxes or move a house or mow their lawn or something like that. Yeah, you could put terms and conditions to that kind of labor, but taking care of your grandkid, that's something you're supposed to enjoy doing and having all the time you can with them. Anyways, let's move on to the next story. Before we were married a year ago, I told dear husband that I noticed his brothers-in-law weren't always around when his sisters visited his parents with their kids. I told him I might want to have a relationship with his parents like that with the in-laws. He seemed surprised, but what could he say? His brothers-in-law hardly ever visit, and my in-laws don't really miss them. Then I asked, how often do they expect us to visit? He said, I don't know, probably twice a month. I said, forget it, they live 1.5 hours away. We have to stay there for 4 to 5 hours to visit. I'm not dedicating a total of 14 hours of my free time to his family each month, especially since his mom either A, ignores me, B, monopolizes the conversation, or C, insinuates I'm a spendthrift. And when she does talk to me, it's always about how I don't take care of her son and I'm not thinking about having children. Or she has us mow the grass, clean her basement and garage, paint her house, or do any number of things her husband or she could actually do instead of calling us endlessly. So, despite it all, the visits have been fewer, but the guilt has always been there. And she kept calling 4 to 5 times a week, all hours of the day, at work, in the car, at night, in the morning. You never know when she'd pop up. It kills your intimacy. It makes you paranoid. It gives you no time to be married or develop a solid relationship. My life had been one long series of adjustments. Kablooey Louie! Everything familiar had vanished. I looked around our house. I saw only 2 pieces of furniture that were mine. I moved into my husband's house, which sister-in-law and mother-in-law decorated. I had a new job after our honeymoon. I had a new family of in-laws, birthdays, anniversaries, milestones to observe, and I didn't even know these people. I've already mentioned the numerous family visits and events they wanted us to commit to. We never had time for his friends, and we barely saw mine. We were doing a lot of work on our house. We were trying to house train a new dog. We spent every major holiday with the in-laws. I felt like my family had totally given me to his family because they hardly ever called. In truth, they were just trying to give us space to be married, and they knew the in-laws were calling all the time, so they wanted to give us a break by not bugging us. As a result, I felt rejected and miffed that they'd call and ask us to do something on a weekend that had already been claimed by the in-laws. Add to this that my dear husband was golfing 4 nights a week, so I was doing most of the housework, trying to train the dog, mow the grass, and work 60 hours a week. What attention he had left, I tried to claim for me instead of having his mom take up most of it. The weird thing is, on top of it all, she was still asking for grandchildren. Like I even had time for the dogs, let alone kids. Besides, could I mention to her that her constant presence was killing our bed life? Dear husband was helping out at home too, to be fair, but he was also doing a lot of work on in-laws' house. Finally, one day, I flipped out. I had worked till 9 p.m. Came home, dropped dead exhausted, changed out of my clothes, and watched in horror as the new puppy peed all over our bed and newly washed sheets. I lost it. I cried so loudly and so hard that I scared the dogs. I'm sure the neighbors could hear me in the house next door, but I couldn't help it. Life looked like one mundane trip of working, cleaning, house training, cooking, no intimacy, and constant appeasement of the in-laws. My mother-in-law had called every morning that week asking me to take care of a business matter and wouldn't let up. The house needed cleaning. I hated my job because it took me away from my dear husband, who I was losing to golf and mother-in-law and the rest of the in-laws. Nothing in life bore any resemblance to how my life was before marriage, when I was in complete control of it. I wanted to curl up in a fetal position and just die. So, dear husband came home from a business trip that night. I told him, deadpan, that the dog had peed in the bed so there weren't any sheets. It was midnight, and I said that the next day we had to have a serious talk about his family. He said okay, but he thought I was overreacting. The next morning, I tried to pull myself together to go to work. He asked about plans for the in-law reunion and his parents' anniversary the following weekend. This was after I hadn't seen him for 4 days. He asked about his family, like I gave a damn about being his family's social calendar. My life's out of whack because I'm doing nothing but trying to improve the quality of life and his family's lives. I started crying and couldn't stop and was totally late for work. I scared him though, enough to call his parents and get them both on the phone and explain that they were calling too damn much for us to form a relationship and a life of ourselves. They were to call once a week, if that. and we weren't going to the reunion, but we'd see them for the anniversary and that would be it for a while. So, from all of this is what I've learned. 1. If you have an issue with overbearing in-laws, you must address it soon before you flip out. You think once a week is too much? Then it is. Stay home. I made it clear to mother-in-law that I know it's important for her to have one-on-one contact with her baby boy, and I didn't want to disrupt that. But I also made sure dear husband reassured me that he knows this isn't an invitation to allow him to move back home with mommy. Then we agreed to visit them together once every 2 weeks or once a month. 2. We bought a book on emotional incest, also online search. We spoke about the subject with my dear husband very delicately, and he agreed there was a lot in it that reflected his mom's treatment of him. We also figured out some stuff that has happened in my family that affects our relationship. It's been an immense help. And there you go, 2 really great tips to deal with smothering in-laws. Poor OP, she went through so much in so little time that yeah, her flipping out is totally comprehensible. I guess the silver lining is that she was able to solve the issue or is solving the issue with her dear husband, and she got 2 really good learnings from it that she shared with us. Alright, and now let's move on to the final story. I have been married to my dear husband for 10.5 years now. For the first 8 years of my marriage, I was subjected to all sorts of slights, stabs in the back, malicious gossip, horrifying gifts, and anything and everything else you can think of from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. One example, my sister-in-law used to work at the front desk of our local hospital. All the cases for ER, OR, and other procedures go through the front desk. My then 14-year-old daughter was scheduled for an abdominal ultrasound. She was having abdominal pain that they couldn't pin down and were going to look for a cyst on her ovaries. Well, you know what an abdominal ultrasound means to a layperson. Pregnancy. Well, of course, this is supposed to be, and I repeat, supposed to be confidential. Well, my sister-in-law went to mother-in-law and told her that my daughter was pregnant. And they spread this rumor all over town. Of course, my daughter was not pregnant. So when she wasn't showing in a few months to cover their trail, they started another rumor to say that she had terminated it. Anyways, back to the point. During these first 8 years, I had excruciating neck pains. I had to go to the doctor for meds and physical therapy. It was happening all of the time and we couldn't figure it out. After 8 years of their abuse, I had a nervous breakdown, was hospitalized and diagnosed with major depression. I stayed for 2 weeks and learned coping skills, among other things, and I learned neck exercises that I do daily, religiously. I also did something I should have done 8 years ago. I cut off all communication with my in-laws. I don't go to their house, I have all their phone numbers blocked on my phone, and if I see them in public, I steer clear. My husband supports this, and he only goes there for 2 hours on Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Mother's and Father's Day. Last year's Memorial Day weekend, we and all of our close friends had our annual Indy 500 day party. We've done this for about 15 years. We were having a lot of fun talking, laughing, playing volleyball, etc. I was sitting in my chair by the fire, resting, when all of a sudden I looked up and who should be coming over to the fire but my husband's mom and dad. My dear husband was standing next to me and I told him to get away from me so that they didn't get near me. So he walked over to another group of friends. My mother-in-law sat in a chair across the fire from me about 30 yards away. I didn't look at them the entire time except to make sure they were not near me. Then they were gone. I really don't know how long they stayed, but it couldn't have been more than about half an hour. And I bet you can guess what happened next. Yep. Within a half an hour of them leaving, I had the most severe neck pain and I had to go home early because it hurt so bad. Then I started putting 2 and 2 together. I hadn't had any neck pain since I had cut them off. Then, when I had to be around them, it came back. Think of all the money and pain I could have saved myself if I had just cut them off a long time ago. I told my husband about this and he agreed that the timing was right. He was well aware of their effect on me because of my previous breakdown, but this just drove it home even further for us. They are toxic to me. So, lesson learned, and one I'd like to share. You may think you can handle your in-laws, but you may be having physical side effects that you don't think about. Maybe it's stomach pains, back pains, headaches, migraines, diarrhea, whatever. So, if your doctor can't help you, it may not be a totally physical problem. It may be showing up as a physical problem, but it's all emotional and psychological abuse. Try cutting out the in-laws for a while and see if the symptoms disappear or lessen. I learned this the hard way. Plus, it's cheaper than the doctor bills. I agree with OP. However, it's not always the in-laws. It could be any kind of toxic relationship you have in your life that really stresses you out and affects you, and that just generates physical manifestations of a psychological problem. So yeah, cutting toxic people out of your life is the best thing that you can do. The hard part is realizing how toxic they are and how it affects you. And so, we've reached the end of the video. If you like it, go ahead and help me out clicking like. If you've liked the video and you still haven't joined the community, go ahead and click subscribe. And of course, don't forget to go to the Lost Genre subreddit where you can cross-post stories for me to put in other videos or write down your own. Okay, and having said all that, I'll see you guys on the next video.